What is up, folks? I have with me Shreyas, who's a very good friend of mine. He is a postdoctoral researcher currently doing it in London. I'll let him explain what exactly he's doing. I've known Shreyas for quite some time. Y'all probably think my channel started in 2020, but I used to upload stuff well before that time. I used to upload ever since 2017. I think Shreyas found me after I shared a video on some Facebook page, and we happened to talk, and we were good friends since back then. The reason I brought Shreyas on today is because he is much more familiar with the world of academia than I am. I think his ideas and opinions on the problems that occur in academia occasionally is something I think will be very valuable for my whole audience. And when I say problems, what I mean is, see, people have all sorts of ideas. And what a lot of people who have invalid, for lack of a better term, invalid ideas or bad ideas in general, what they do is they write what looks like a study in a very formal language, very study kind of language, and they get it published in a journal. And to the untrained eye, that might look like the idea, the bad idea the person is promoting is a good idea. It's a legitimate idea. It's a valid idea. So this is a problem that needs to be combated, that needs to be fought against. And there's a system in the world of academia for doing exactly this. It's called peer review. And I want Shreyas to talk to us about review. But before you do, can you tell us in detail a little bit about what you do exactly?
Okay, so I completed my PhD in the Indian Institute of Science. This is in 2013. I defended my thesis, and shortly after that, I moved to Sheffield, where I'm doing my postdoc. So I work in speech technologies. I did my PhD in the same area, speech technologies, and now in the postdoc as well, I'm working on speech technologies. Yeah, I guess some other day we can talk exactly on my research topic. But yeah, speech technology, AI, NLP, these are like quite related areas which myself and my peers work on. So that's kind of like my area of expertise. So when it comes to peer review, like I have also reviewed several papers, and I've also published many papers. Don't take this the wrong way, I've been the victim of like very harsh criticisms, but very valid ones, and they really helped me improve my write-ups and resubmit, and they kind of improved the quality of my work.
So, what exactly is peer review for people who are unfamiliar?
So peer review is kind of like an exam evaluation, I would say, but not exactly, because when we think of academia, we are usually familiar with schooling or some undergraduate or master's course where we have some coursework, and then we write an exam at the end, and then they review that, right? You get your grades. So this exam review is on a specific topic. You have specific questions which are expected to answer, and then there is some expected answers that they look for, right? And there is some reference which they usually compare your answer scripts with, unless it's an essay or something, and then they grade you accordingly, right? So that's basically exams. But then when we talk about research, it's not really something you have a ready reference always. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't, and sometimes you have entirely new ideas coming up, and you need validation, you need external validation. It might be a good idea to you, but how useful it is, or how well do other researchers in your field, other experts think about it, is some valuable feedback that really helps improve the quality of work, and also to keep bad science in check. So that's where peer review comes in. So it's basically a formal system where other experts in your field are assigned to review your work and provide a formal feedback. And then it is also used as a criteria to publish existing research that you have conducted and written about. Usually, if you're a master's or a PhD student, you write thesis, and the thesis is peer reviewed. So it's reviewed by experts in that field. That's basically it. So it's similar to a thesis review. It's all the same, right? Thesis review and journal reviews, or any conference papers that's supposed to go through peer review. Any research paper that you find online must have undergone peer review unless it's published on archive. So archive is a place where you just write up and submit. There is no peer review, but it's available for everyone to see.
When exactly does this process of peer review happen? Like, let's say I'm a researcher, I'm doing my work, I have my findings, I put it on paper, and now what? Before I publish it, it has to be peer reviewed.
Mhm.
But how does that process happen?
So usually, once you write a draft, you get it reviewed informally by your lab mates or research group fellows or your supervisor if you have one, or basically your colleagues. So once that is done, you submit it to a journal or a conference. It depends where you want to publish your work. So when you submit it to a journal, you first choose, there's a process where you choose a relevant journal where the published topics meet the theme of your research, and then you submit it. Now the editor of that journal will read a small write up. You basically submit a cover letter along with it that basically summarizes what kind of work this is. So based on that, they look for experts in your field. So essentially, it's like if I'm working on speech technologies and I write a paper on, let's say, speech synthesis. So, speech synthesis is a specific topic in speech technologies where you have text and you want to convert that text to audio of some particular voice. It's a solved problem essentially, but then there are still some drawbacks, like the emotion is not perfect yet in synthesized audio. And I might have done some research where the emotion is better, and then I want to basically publish what I did and get feedback. So I submitted to a journal. There are other people working in speech synthesis who can understand concepts of speech synthesis. They will be assigned to review your paper, and they will look for some things like conflict of interest. They should not be from the same institute as you, or they should not be someone you have worked with, and so on. So basically, someone who can provide an objective criticism of your work is assigned. They will usually assign 3 or 4 reviews, and it takes time, because they might not be free. And peer review is also something that is done at no cost. Like it's based on a request. So I can get a request from a journal editor. Can you please review this paper? And it's a community effort, right? Because I review papers because I also want my papers to be reviewed. It is a work that all of us must indulge in academia. Yeah, that's how the assignment happens. They take some time, like they take minimum 2 weeks. They'll be given up to 2 months, I guess, usually. If they're free, they accept. They'll have like 2 weeks to accept whether to review or not. Uh, and then once they accept to review, they'll be given a timeline for reviewing, and then they read the paper during that timeline, and they do some background literature study. They do other background checks, right? Usually even the journal will have a set of questions which the reviewer is supposed to answer, like is this work novel, does it meet all the ethical guidelines or something like that, and then is it technically valid, are there any issues that you think, and so on. And then there will be 3 to 4 reviewers for each paper. So you get a diverse set of opinions, and then the editor or a meta reviewer will look at all of these reviews, and then they basically get back to the authors. They say, okay, these are the reviews that you received, and yeah, all the reviews are good, so we would like to proceed for publication. Or they could say, okay, there are some major changes that are required, so we will send it back to you for major revision. So you can take like 3 months or so, and then you can rewrite the critical parts which need to be addressed, and then the authors work on those reviews and then try to answer them, include them in the paper, and then they resubmit it. So it's the same process, like one submission. This it can go back and forth multiple times between the reviewers and the authors through the meta reviewer or the editor. Finally, it will get published. Or if the reviews are really poor, I mean, basically, if the meta reviewer thinks that this is not worth publishing in this journal and the authors can do much better, they will reject the paper, and they will still inform the authors about the reviews. Like they'll send the reviews to the authors and say, okay, these are the reviews. We would like to encourage you to completely revise, work on it, and resubmit it as a fresh submission to either the same journal or to a different journal or conference or whatever. It's a nice process where it's basically a filter, like bad ideas get filtered out, or like, and also the authors get to decide, right? Okay, my peer reviewers think that, like, my peers think that is not a good idea. maybe it's not worth working, so let me drop this idea, let me start working on something else. Or they could think that they have valid points, like I can work on this, it's not some big deal, and then they could work on it, right? So, and sometimes it might not be fair also, like the reviewers may have not understood your work, in which case it's up to the author to like write it in a better way, in a more understandable way. So even communication is important here. So a lot of factors play a role to write up a manuscript published in a journal. So that's how peer review process happens.
So, if I got this correctly, the people who do the reviews don't work for the journal, but since they're part of the community, the
Yes.
journal sends it to people in the community, correct?
Yes, yes. They don't exactly work for the journal, but then they would be known in the field, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, the journal can be something like Elsevier, right? Which is a broad side. There are multiple journals in Elsevier. Each journal will be handled by a team. There will be a chief editor, there will be a board of editors who are basically working in academia. They are researchers themselves. They're not really just the journal staff. So they will have, like Elsevier will have its own staff, which like non-technical staff. But then those who are involved in this peer review process is basically researchers, faculties in various universities and so on.
Got it.
So the entire process is like a community effort.
The reviewers don't get paid by the journal. They
No,
don't get paid.
not usually. Yeah.
Okay. Do the reviewers know the authors of the research? Do they know who's reviewing my work or who has written this paper?
Not usually. So there are like three types of review systems. One is a single blind review, where the reviewers know the authors, but the authors don't know the reviewers. Then there is double blind, where when you submit your work, you don't write your name on the paper, and then the editor will know you, who you are, but then they will just send it to the reviewers, but the reviewers will not know who you are, and you have to take care not revealing your identity in the paper indirectly as well. That is something that is important in a double blind review system. And there's more recently open reviews. So open reviews is where you submit the paper, and then all the papers submitted to that conference, it's usually in a conference, all the papers submitted are like assigned to, I mean, not assigned to anyone in particular, I guess, but it's just put openly onto their website, where anyone can read it and add comments to it. Some conferences like NeurIPS, I think they have both. I have not submitted to NeurIPS so far, so but I've read a lot of papers in NeurIPS. So I think they have both single blind as well as open review system, where you have one round of single blind reviews, and then what goes through that will be put in open review for a second round of filtering or something. I'm not really entirely sure. I have to check actually. I think this is how it is.
So, let's say I have some bad ideas, some wacky ideas. I want to get it published. Obviously, the reviewers will, like, if they're working in my field, they'll be familiar with the kind of research I'm claiming that I've done, and obviously, it's going to be. I can't get past these people. If I was a fraudulent researcher, what would I do to get past this peer review system? Or is there something I can do to get past it?
I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, but I'm
of
just
course.
phrasing the question this way to just I'm
Right,
just
but
phrasing
usually,
this.
there are fraudulent researches that exist, like in various journals. There are some poor journals where they claim it to be a peer reviewed journal, but then it is not really. Like the authors pay some money to get it published, and then the journal makes money and then publishes it saying it's peer reviewed. Or like they could just namesake get some people to review your paper, pay the reviewers some part money that they get from the authors, and then have some positive comments, like just to show people, okay, we are actually a peer reviewed journal. So these are like predatory journals essentially. Basically fraudulent research gets published, but nobody takes them seriously anyway. So I mean, maybe the media sometimes take such research seriously. I mean, I'm talking about the mainstream media. Sometimes they do that, and it's a problem. Like there's a lot of people who are really against this. I mean, of course, including me and yourselves, who has you have yourself created a lot of content on this. So yeah, there are some predatory journals which basically publish such work, but I wouldn't recommend. And I would recommend. I don't really know what journal is predatory. If you ask me, like, okay, is this journal a predatory journal? I wouldn't really know. I would. I would probably take like 2 or 3 days to even figure that out whether it's predatory journal or not. It's not a straightforward answer that you can give immediately.
Okay, so there's predatory journals that have either a poor peer review or no peer review at all. Then there
Yes.
are good journals that have a good system of peer review. So if a study is published in one of these good journals, is it guaranteed that the study or the findings of the study are trustable, believable, whatever?
Yes, generally the answer is yes, because if it's a peer reviewed paper, then there must be something credible in it. But also, bad research also can get through such good journals as well, because the reviewers are assigned not really by chance. They do take good care in assigning the reviewers. But it could also be the case that some new faculty, let's say, someone who just started reviewing, might not be very critical. And then they would not really have that much critical thinking skills to go through the paper and, like, how do I put it? Give a critical perspective, but then they might just think it's a good idea. The advantage is that if there are 4 reviewers assigned, all 4 reviewers will not have that perspective, will likely not have that perspective. So it's quite unlikely that you have 4 lenient reviewers who think your work is good, and you manage to fool them in that regard. So that doesn't usually happen. That's why you don't usually see such bad papers in good journals. But also, if that happens, then over time it gets found out, and then it's usually retracted. The reason for retraction will also be mentioned in the website. This is basically done to ensure that the journal remains credible and trustable. So it's retraction is also a part of peer review that way.
So you mentioned that it's unlikely, but it's possible that a bad research can get through peer review and get published in
Right.
a good journal, even though it's unlikely. Can the reverse happen? Like, can a good research be published in a bad journal, bad non-peer reviewed journal?
Unlikely, because nobody would submit it to a bad journal unless they're really unaware. But then they could, if a really smart student is in a not a very well known university, and then he does some work, but then his advisor may be, you know, just publishing in some predatory journals. And it could be the case that the advisor would ask the student to publish in that journal. So that can also happen, but I don't think such work would get traction. And if it does cause some damage, it unfairly increases the reputation of. But I don't think I'm not aware of any such cases, to be honest.
And now I'll ask you the most vital question, the most important question in this whole thing. How do you identify
Okay.
if a paper is peer reviewed or if a journal is a good peer reviewed, like it has a good system of peer review while publishing? How do you identify that?
Usually, good journals are well known. Like, if you're if you're freshly entering academia, you'll be a part of a lab which has already published papers in some journals, right? And your advisor would know that this is a good journal, and then you start reading the papers, and you would have some idea, right? That way. So that is for us, like for academics. But for people, I think those who are really interested need to put some effort and time listening to various popular people. You see where they publish, and you can see popular, like, personalities who are famous and who kind of disagree with each other. You can see if they are publishing in the same journal or different journals. These are some questions that you can ask, and try to figure out, like, which journal is more trustable, which person is more trustable, and so on. So yeah, it does require its own set of critical thinking skills, and so critical thinking is definitely something absolutely required if someone wants to identify which is a good journal and which is not.
So, for the average layperson, the only way of finding out is or figuring out if a journal is legitimate is by seeing who are the people publishing in it, or like given a journal, how will a layperson, identify if it's a good journal or not?
You can look at which is the most cited study in that journal. The first, like, pick the 5 or 10 most cited studies, and then you can just go through the abstracts and see what they're talking about, and you can just look at the kind of quality of the write-up. If you have a journal and say, okay, this is the most cited paper, but then you don't think that this is good work, then it's likely not a good journal. So if you think, okay, it looks credible, then maybe it has some credibility. So that's how you, and this kind of opinion that you form would change over time, right? Like naturally. So that is supposed to happen, and that's how it is usually. And then you look at the authors also, and then you see which university they are from, and if a lot of top universities like MIT, Stanford, or any of the top universities throughout the world have been publishing in that journal, then it's likely a good one. So that's another way you can figure out.
From what you said, I understand that a person who wants to figure out if a journal is good or legitimate, they need some level of expertise to judge if let's say, a particular study or research is a good area of study or whatever, by looking at the
Yes.
abstract. So they need some level of expertise. So,
Right.
what if I'm completely new to the field? I don't know anything about what's going on, or what kind of research is being done, or anything. Like, if I read an abstract, I don't understand anything. But for whatever reason, I want to judge the quality of that journal by from studies like those. Is there a way I can do it?
For a total newbie, I would recommend that they start with something popular, right? So if something is popular, if it has received a few thousand citations, a few hundred citations, and then all the citations are in quite positive note, like a bad paper also can receive a lot of citations, and all the papers that cite that paper would have basically bashed that paper. So that way you can figure out, okay, this might not be a good idea, and that's how our opinions would evolve, right? So that's how it is.
What I feel can be a good thing in this regard is an actual expert in that area, or someone who knows this maybe better than me. They can
Yes.
go through the paper and tell me what their opinion is, and then I can form a judgment based on that opinion. What do you
Right.
think about this?
That is true. That is also very true. And I think that's where content creators like you come in, right? So I think you can act as a bridge between the scientific community and the people. You can look at popular research, and then for whatever reason, it could be for a good reason or a bad reason, something that got popular, and then you see what the scientific community is talking about that. Like, of course, popular papers will divide opinions, and even among experts, if you see, for example, on AI, whether AI will take over the world one day, experts are divided. Like, for example, Jeffrey Hinton is sees it as an actual possibility that the AI will take over, and then Jan LeCun, on the other hand, says it will be in our control. It's not something that we need to worry about. On certain topics, even the experts, the famous ones, would have divided opinions. But this is where nuance come in, right? Like this is some an example which is a very speculative one, and of course it will be divided. But then something that is established, like alternative medicine, for example, like you have two sets of experts. One, experts of the alternative medicine who claim to, like, who have been working in that field, and then actual modern medicine researchers who completely don't consider alternative medicine as medicine at all. They consider it as pseudoscience, right? So there is a clear difference in opinion, and one side is actually right. It's not something speculative. It's something in the past that people are talking about, like whether there is evidence for something that one set of people are claiming versus the lack of evidence, or evidence against their claims, and so on. So in this way, like from what I have seen, uh, taking this example of alternative medicine versus modern medicine, alternative medicine does not really have good evidence which meets the standard set by modern medicine clinical trials, or whatever it is. It's like there is you can find a lot of papers in favor of alternative medicine, but all in all those cases the evidence are quite poor. Based on my observation, based on how various critics of alternative medicines have you know spoken against it, I can now form an opinion. Okay, there is a severe lack of evidence, and it's not at a paper level. It's the lack of evidence is in a community level. That is some major red flag. So now I can have an opinion that okay, the entire community has together managed to spend so long without any decent evidence. Now, like what reason do I have to trust it? So that's how I form my opinion on on a topic that I'm not an expert of. So that's how I think people should go about. I think there's a good analogy, I would say.
One last question that I have. I've heard of a thing called H factor or impact factor of a journal.
Mm. Right.
If I Google it, I can figure out, I can get the impact factor of whichever journal I
Right.
want. How effective is this number, this impact factor, in telling me whether that journal is legitimate, trustworthy, good, peer reviewed, etc.?
So impact factor definitely plays some role. Higher the impact factor, the more popular the articles are. That's for sure. And then popularity, of course, has to be taken with a grain of salt. So you could have not really predatory journals, but then you could have journals on a topic which is not really science. So in that case, all the peers agree that this is legitimate, and that is the reason a lot of papers get published and cited. So impact factor is basically the average number of citations per paper in that journal in a given time. So journals claim like 2 year impact factor of 10. That means in the last 2 years, every paper has got on an average 10 citations. That's what it means. And yeah, generally it is a good thing. Like higher, like if it's really high, like more than 10, 15, it's likely good. But then if it's on the lower range, like 3 or 4, you can't really say it's bad. That's the problem. And also it depends on how many papers get published, right? Like if the journal is not really publishing too many papers, but then it's still a predatory journal, it might have a high impact factor because like all the published work cite each other in that journal, and then it could blow up the impact factor artificially that way, I guess. But yeah, so it's not something that you should look at alone, the impact factor, but then you need to look at it with what quality that journal offers,
Okay.
and like basically who publishes in that journal. Like if it's a journal which has a very wide community, like all throughout the world, like there are lots of top universities in every country publishing papers in that journal or a conference, then it's likely a good one. For example, like each area has its own flagship journal, so that's another thing, right? For example, in my area in speech, there are some journals like transactions on audio and speech TASLP. So that's one of the flagship journals of speech research. And then there are flagship conferences for different areas. Like for computer vision, there is CVPR, and there is for neural networks, NeurIPS, neural information processing systems. And then for speech, there's Interspeech, ICAST. All these are like very top tier conferences. And these are the conferences where uh, every top university of every country publishes. So there are like well-known labs working in that area who have been very impactful, whose alumni are working in various top companies, like creating different products and so on. And there are also sponsorships from several companies. Like if Google is sponsoring some research, it's likely good. So because otherwise they wouldn't really waste their money. These are like lot of factors can basically signify whether a journal or whether a research group is good or not. So yeah, there are a lot of indicators that you can look out for. There's no really one thing.
By the way, Shreyas has written about peer review in his blog, which I'll link below. You can check that out. So, yeah, as we were speaking, we thought of actually was Shreyas's idea. He thought maybe we can actually go through a particular video where a person is talking about how the system of peer review has flaws, and he basically had some issues with peer review. Maybe we'll talk about why also, but we thought maybe we should watch it live and see what he says in that video, and then comment on that, and that will be something valuable for this video. So I'll just share my screen.
People talk glibly about science. What is science? People coming out of a university with a master's degree or a PhD, you take them into the field, and they literally don't believe anything unless it's a peer-reviewed paper. It's the only thing they accept. And you say to them, but let's observe, let's think, let's discuss. They don't do it. It's just, is it in a peer-reviewed paper or not? That's their view of science. I think it's pathetic.
He starts off good, like very, very, like, what to say, rage baiting scientists. I would say, yeah, it's definitely rage baiting of scientists. Okay. So, yeah, initially I was like, what's he saying? Like, he seems to make sense, but also not everyone are like that. Like, maybe some people are like that, but not everyone are like that. That was my first thought. But I was like, okay, let me continue listening.
Gone into universities as bright young people. They come out of them brain dead, not even knowing what science means. They think it means peer-reviewed papers, etc. No, that's academia. And if a paper is peer-reviewed, it means everybody thought the same, therefore they approved it. An unintended consequence is that when new knowledge emerges, new scientific insights, they can never, ever be peer-reviewed.
He said if something new that has never been seen by the field comes, that can never be peer-reviewed. Is that true?
Not at all. I mean, like, new things come all the time. Like, basically, Einstein's theory of relativity, which basically redefined how we understand gravity, right? So how did that get peer reviewed? Like, if what he's saying is really true, that could have never been peer reviewed, right? And also, like, not everybody easily understand Einstein's. I mean, if you have to really take this example, Einstein really put in a lot of effort to make it very understandable. Like, he wrote down all his thoughts in a very understandable way, and then submitted it, and that's how people recognized it. And another thing is, like, under certain conditions, like, his equations basically get reduced down to Newton's laws of gravity. New ideas come, like, and the better the evidence a new idea has, it will get peer reviewed, it will get accepted. This tells me that this person is sus, like, he had some idea that people didn't really
He probably got
value,
by some
and he didn't really do a good job like Einstein, if he really thought his work is similar to Einstein's.
I have a few comments also here. So when you say a new idea in a field, it's not black and white, right? Like, there is a gradual warming up to that idea that happens. Even in this case, the Einstein idea you talked about, his idea for relativity, his theories on gravity, they came as a result of an experiment that happened just a few years prior to that. It's called the Michelson and Morley experiment, and it found out that light speed does not change with frame of reference, and that was an experimental finding. It had evidence for it, and then based on that, Einstein, okay, if light speed is constant, then these are the things that will also have to be true for it to be valid. And when you put it in this reasonable manner, even your peers in the same field who have never come across this idea can still see the reasonability and the logic behind the whole thing before their review of it. And that is something that is going to happen in every field. So it's not true that out of the blue an idea that's new to the field will get rejected. It's not true at all.
Yeah, it's not true at all. That's that's completely, yeah, of course peer review is not some, it's not a roadblock to good science. It's like
Hmm.
it is a filter. It
Yeah.
kind of filters out bad science,
Hmm.
but then also not very well. It's not a very efficient filter, I would say, but then it's not really a broken system, right?
Hmm.
So it does help us improve the quality of our research.
Yep.
So yeah, let's
So
see
let's
what else he
continue
has to say.
watching.
So we're blocking all new advances in science that are big advances. If you look at the breakthroughs in science, almost always they don't come from the center of that profession. They come from the fringe.
But they're also peer reviewed. Like
Yeah. So, like what
okay.
you said, peer review does not block good science. It filters, what people claim to be science.
The finest candle makers in the world couldn't even think of electric lights. They don't come from within. They often come from outside the breaks. We're going to kill ourselves because of stupidity.
So,
Yeah, electric lights. I mean, like if someone came up with you, like if you went to a candle makers conference with an electric light, which nobody has ever seen before, then yeah, everybody is going to be impressed, man. Like they're not going to throw you out. What is that even? That was complete nonsense. Like I mean, like after this, after I watched this, this was my reaction, and then later I googled who he was and why don't people like accept what he's trying to say. But basically, what he's trying to say is absolutely problematic. It's not an idea that works, right? So basically, he's an ecologist who claims that the solution to improve the crop yield is to eat more meat, farm more animals, like have them graze all the grasslands, and then eat those animals, and then they become fertile, and then like basically a way to clear old crops and get the soil to be fertile using the manure and so on. It kind of sounds like this perpetual motion system, like where motor is connected to a generator and then back to the motor and yay, infinite free energy. It doesn't work that way. Basically, it's really bad science, and of course, it's rightly been called out by the actual scientific community. It's pseudoscience, basically. Even all these perpetual motion systems, it's not even unfalsifiable. Like it's already falsified. There's a difference. So something that's already falsified, if you just cling on to it, and it doesn't really make sense.
cool. I think that's it, Shreyas. Thanks for spending
Yeah.
time and telling us about this whole system that we have. I think this is going to be very useful for people who might have come across, some people claiming something, citing a certain study or
Right.
research. Yep, that's it. I think with that we'll end this call. Shreyas, his write up is down below, and yeah, I think that's it. Anything else, Shreyas?
It was great talking to you, and we can also discuss multiple other topics or like review such kind of videos. That will actually make good content, you know.
Yeah, true. Thank you, Shreyas, for chatting with us, and we'll see everyone in the next video. Bye.
See you, everyone. Thank you. Bye.